right, he then went into business. It was as a businessman that he became the third wealthiest businessman who was a sportsman ever. He died as a billionaire. Now, if we're talking family business, we are going to be talking about the business he created after he retired from basketball. Okay? So, given this context, previous speakers, Professor Okonedo, Professor David-West, spoke about the fact that family businesses are very critical to economies. Extremely so. In fact, if you go to Europe, you will find that the role of, if you take out the family business, the business that is started and run as a family concern, all right, you won't have Europe as you know it today. The US may be less so, but Europe, where, if the cradle of economic, if you like, growth and development and the models that we celebrate, okay, was built on the family business. 60% and more of Germany, which is a top 5, economic producing nation, the GDP comes from family businesses. Why is this very important? It's very important from an economic standpoint, from a development standpoint, from an everybody standpoint. Family businesses, we tend to think about them because of their primary contribution, which is job creation and employment. But really think about it. The social fabric, the backbone of society, as we know it, actually comes from family business. Okay, was talking about football. If you think about soccer and the home of soccer, which is Great Britain, and you think about these teams, Aston Villa, Blackburn Rovers, Everton, and so on, right? These teams, look at the roots of them, you will find that the sponsors, the drivers, and so on, in their early days, and actually for maybe 100 years thereafter, actually were family businesses. And I say this for you to understand that at the very fabric of a successful country, successful community, are successful family businesses. In Africa, I believe that our greatest challenge to development has been our inability to have a succession in family businesses. That the mortality of family businesses has a perfect correlation with our stunted development, our stunted growth, and so on. Now, there's one song. I think the rapper is called Drake. It says, starting from the bottom. I don't know if you know the song. Very, very famous. Okay? The problem with starting from the bottom, if you're competing with somebody who is starting from the top, is that you have to travel far to get to where they are starting from. By that time, they've gone. So every time we start from the bottom, so there is a great business, Aig-Imoukhuede creates a great business, okay, assembles capital, assembles a brand, assembles confidence, makes an impact, creates a society and a community of people who add value. And then the thing ends. What happens? You disaggregate all that capital that has been formed. You disaggregate that great brand. You disaggregate the talent and so on. And then we start from the bottom again. Now, in the other country, country B, who we are competing with, they harness what has been built and build on what has been built and build on what has been built and build on what has been built. And that leads to what they call exponential growth over time. You cannot compete with compounding. I don't know if there are any students here, if you study finance, but you see the power of compounding is in the power of compounding versus a simple growth rate or an arithmetic growth rate, you can't compete with it. And so therefore, understand that the family business and succession within a family business leads to a compounded growth effect that results in advanced development. If we don't fix that in Africa, we remain stunted. It's as simple as that. Next slide. So I was speaking to one of the most brilliant people I know, an economist, highest level of education possible. And the person asked me, how is the family business? And I knew exactly what the person was referring to. Okay? And I said, it's great, but I spend more time on the family enterprise. And the next question was, family business, family enterprise, what's the difference? Okay. I'm going to explain this to you because it's very, very important. When you think about the family business, and particularly the context of a business school or university, you think about, let us say, sound academic and theoretical underpinnings for an activity. That knowledge that enables the business to function. Technical issues, business school issues, scholastic scientific issues, completely sound and necessary. However, the issue of succession, the issue of continued relevance, the issue of growth requires those who founded the business or who own the business, who seek for this business to remain relevant to the society that it serves, to go and transit from thinking about a family business to thinking about a family enterprise. And you will see that the family business is one element of the family enterprise. The family enterprise is a broader ecosystem, much broader ecosystem than the family business. It includes the family business. It includes what you've described as some of the things I do, which is, founding and stimulating a family office to play its role within the family enterprise. It includes the family's overall interests. It includes philanthropy. It includes issues of governance. And it is no coincidence that the early adopters of the family enterprise philosophy and concept include the likes of J.P. Morgan, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, the Mars family, and I can go on and on. These are the thoughts, modelers, exemplars that I spend a lot of my time on. Thinking through why they do or did what they did, how, if you do the same things or better, you can make the type of impact we see that they made on their own societies and so on. And hopefully, what role could I and the family enterprise that I'm linked to play in Nigeria's development? And if we go to the next slide, you will see the family enterprise. Now, I'm going to be very disciplined in terms of my coverage of topics, because any of these items, these 4 things that are on this slide, if I was to talk about them, I could talk for hours on each one. But of course, we keep talking family, family, family. So the first question, of course, is what is or who is the family? I'll make it easy for you to understand. The family is who the wealth creator says it is. The family is who the wealth owner says it is. If Dr. Cosmas Maduka says the family is, and he brings out for us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people who look Chinese, who are obviously Chinese, whose names are Chinese, and he says this is the Maduka family. What is the Maduka? It's the people he brought. And why is Dr. Maduka in the position to determine who the Maduka family is? Simple, because he created the wealth. You can like it, you can hate it, you can do anything you want, but that is the reality. Okay? Now, the wealth creator and the wealth owner determine who the family is, and hopefully at its original form, determine what the family is at its original form. But there's something called death, and all of us will die one day. When we die, there's something called law that determines that that which you created and owned passes on to people who survive you. So Dr. Maduka may have brought out 6 Chinese people, but the day Dr. Maduka dies, if he didn't transfer his wealth to those 6 Chinese people, there are certain Madukas I know, young men, charity and so on, they will come and flog these Chinese people out of. And because the law says that Dr. Maduka's children own, do you get it now? And so again, you begin to see now that these things are not as straightforward as you just assume they are. And the less you plan, the more wahala you're creating, not just for yourself, but for those who are coming after you. Now, what is the family business? Again, as you've seen that your definition of who or what the family is very important, you have to think very intentionally about this. Is it Okonedo and Sons, which, by the way, presupposes that if Oke doesn't have daughters, they are going to ask him some big questions. So it's always best to maybe say Okonedo and Sons and daughters, so everybody is clear. Now, if you want to include your siblings, then you can say Maduka brothers and sisters. I'll stop there. I don't want to be mischievous. But then, of course, as you look at the world today, you see people send signals. XYZ Enterprises, XYZ PLC, XYZ. So obviously, if you are sending a signal that this is a public limited liability company, you are sending a signal that, yes, it's a family business, but the rules and issues around it and the ways we are going to, approach business, etc., will be guided by certain models, etc. Now, this thing they call a family office, I want to tell you something. There's no family office I know properly structured that does the work it's meant to do that is not going to cost you at least $1 million a year to run it. At least, minimum. Now, the relevance of this is therefore, if the family wealth is not at a certain level, it's a complete waste of money to go and set up a family office. In fact, it's not sustainable. Now, if your ambitions are to get there, you can start the process of building around a family office with a view to, building up to a full-fledged family office. Where am I going? The truth of the matter is that this family business and this family enterprise discussion we're having, frankly speaking, is only relevant at a certain level of financial success. You may not like what I'm telling you, but what I'm saying is that the investment, when I say you may not like it, it's true too, but when I say you don't like it, just this reality. The investment in these concepts, family business, family enterprise, and so on, presupposes that there is an awareness of competition, which is to say that we in Nigeria are competing with family enterprises and family businesses across the world. And our relevance is going to be a function of the success that we achieve. And so when I say you might not like it, I will always push you who has a business to operate at the very, very best of your abilities, however uncomfortable it may be. So coming into issue means that when you look at a man called Musk, who leaves South Africa from a wealthy family and moves to the US, forget his politics and forget his philosophies, and who, by virtue of certain things installed between his parents, has determined that he will continue to add value to the world. And in doing so, he will compete against the very best in the US, the very best in Asia, and create all types of family businesses that are of great significance. In Nigeria, we should not lose sight of the reason why we are having these discussions around family businesses and family. It's not so that when I do my own, I then cover it and then, diminish it. We are having this conversation because we want businesses, we want successors, we want entrepreneurs, we want men and women in this room to go forth and multiply and take possession. That is why we're doing this. And the sum total of our success will be seen in the GDP, in the output, and in the profits and dividends that we distribute. So at the end of the day, this is a competitive issue. This is an issue of survival of Nigeria versus Vietnam, Nigeria versus South Africa, Nigeria versus whichever nation. Do you get it now? Thank you. I then put in this, well, it's not my diagram, it's from the World Economic Forum. We've looked at the family office, the family firm, the family foundation. And the interesting thing is that you see that everything is linked there apart from the family office and the family philanthropy. Sometimes they link up, sometimes they don't. Do you know why? It's very important for me to raise this point. Do you know why? And I'm seeing it real time, live. In my life. Do you know why? I'll tell you. Philanthropy is a personal choice. Always a personal choice. Always a personal choice. And therefore, my choice as to what I want to impact on without a profit motive, without a profit function, with simply my own version of whatever term of impact I decide on whatever type of audience, human, animal, or whatever I decide to impact on is my own choice. You cannot force your philanthropy on others. So, if you want a multi-generational philanthropic pursuit, make sure you set it up. Make sure you arrange for the funding of it. Make sure that it is professionally run and so on. Because you cannot compel, if I love dogs and my family likes, no, not even if I love dogs and pets and so on, and my family loves academics and Lagos Business School, all the provision I made for dogs, if I didn't do it properly, when I go, they'll just carry it and give Lagos Business School. And they have every right to do so. Okay. Next slide. The concept of stewardship. Who was the steward? I heard somebody ask that question. I think Okay said, is the steward in church and so on. The steward actually is, if you think back in time, ancient history, the steward is this wise person, this skilled individual, okay, whose role was to prepare young, could be promising, just could be simply by virtue of birth, even irrespective of whether promising or not, but who was a future leader for the role that they are going to play in the future. That's a steward. That's what stewards do. And so the concept of stewardship, first of all, is that it's not about the self. The first issue about stewardship is that it's not about the self. Okay? It's not about the past. It's about the future. It's consistent with the go forth and multiply and take. Understand this. Our past is important historically, particularly for learning lessons. Our past should never be forgotten. But the future is going to be fought and won in the future. So you are preparing those who will be around in the future, knowing that you will not be there. There's something that I learned several years ago as I started to get steeped into family enterprise, into succession and so on. You cannot rule from the grave. However much you love it, however much you feel, whatever arrangements you make, once you are there, let's even assume that you are looking, you will be there. You get the point now. So, really, I recognize that the only thing that you can do is to try your very best to ensure that the stewardship context, whilst you are alive, is as effective as you can try to make it be. And you pray that God gives you long life, okay, to continue investing in it. Because, as you know, if you like sports as I do, one of the most interesting things is when you talk to very accomplished sports persons. And they will tell you that when you ask the question, who is the best footballer you know? And they will tell you, when we were 14 years old, when we were 12 years old, when we were in camp, there's one boy. If you see what this boy used to do, if you see how this boy used to play, and then you ask, where is that boy today? So, you begin to understand that in this game, right, it's not, first, God, you pray every day that which you envisage, that which you seek, that picture you paint, is the picture that is. But then I'll tell you something. The wise steward and the wise provider to the steward then recognizes and realizes that in making your choices, in making your decisions, right, it's very much about wisdom. It's very much about balance. It's very much about understanding that there are no single bets. There are no single ways. It's about seeking, and I will come to that. So let me ask you the first question. There is a concept of responsible ownership which relates to the family business. But stewardship transcends responsible ownership. So responsible ownership is this sense that, okay, fine, God blessed our efforts in Access Bank. And as the largest shareholders of Access Bank, we don't own Access Bank, but the largest shareholders, we assume a responsible ownership stance, which is to say that our contributions as owners must always be guided by responsible thought and responsible outcomes. Are you with me? Now, however, stewardship transcends that. Because stewardship says that I recognize that if I make my family stronger, if I go beyond access, if I build a stronger nation, the chances of access becoming even greater than it was when we participated in building it as a business in the hands of others, which may include or may not include Aig-Imoukhuede or Wigwe members, okay, is much higher. So, stewardship nurtures successors, not necessarily family members. Stewardship nurtures successors. Stewardship nurtures successors in government, successors in business, successors in philanthropy, successors in entertainment for the support of the family enterprise. And again, I'm talking here now, when I say successors in government, they don't report to me. They are not part of our family, but we recognize that for our family enterprise to make the type of impact and compete against successful family enterprises in other continents and so on, right, Nigeria must be strong. Nigeria must be much stronger. And that is why you begin to take an interest beyond that which you own. So there's a responsible ownership of a business. There is a stewardship of not just your family, but of a nation. The culture of stewardship, however, flourishes when cohesion is high. Okay, use the word unity. I use the word cohesion. Because unity is not the issue. And you will find that with very large families, there are families that are the Rothschilds now. I mean, if you were to call certain family meetings, When you have the 1,800 old Japanese family, I know that they don't like to have many children and so on, but that one, they must be in their thousands or, right? The level of cohesion is what you seek, not necessarily unity. And in the world that we have today where, people have all types of thoughts and, about who they are, what they are, and so on, okay? You are saying, right, that whatever differences that we have, okay, we will remain a cohesive family unit. That is what you're looking for. Now, you know that image I showed you, where you had family office, family philanthropy, family firm. And you think about critical roles. And if you understand our family enterprise comprises several companies, several activities, several non-profits, and so on. How many critical roles do you think there are in our family enterprise today? Critical roles. How many do you think? Critical roles. I didn't say roles. Critical. By a critical role is a role where it's like, if you have a stone in your shoe, okay? That's a critical role. Any role where if it's not well practiced or handled, it will be like that stone in your shoe. We have about 500. How many critical roles do you think we are going to have in 20 years? Aha. So, let me even imagine that the successors had to bear my name or Herbert's name. What rate of procreation will deliver the pipeline to fill critical roles? It's not possible. Some of the most critical roles, actually, that we find in family enterprises are the roles of the non-executive director, whether in the business, whether in philanthropy, and so on. The roles of fiduciaries, etc. I didn't add those in the critical roles. If I add the non-executive directors, it runs into hundreds now. So again, you begin to understand that this is a full-time job. And there is a difference between thinking through stewardship, succession, and these issues from not just the perspective of your, let us say, biological relations or people who bear the same name. My successor pack, okay, is several Excel rows and columns, my succession pack, what I look at every day, okay? But I think you want us to focus on the, what I would say, core family succession issues, which I will do because it's also important. The first thing I want to leave you with is this notion of how long do you want your family enterprise to last for? I'll tell you how long we've set for our own family enterprise. You heard Tengen. Tengen means 10 generations. 10 business generations. A business generation, if you are talking a Nigerian, African business generation, is 10 years. Because our own case, if you see 10 years, you thank God. So that's 100 years. Okay? All right? Now, but in truth, we are thinking about the classic business generation, which is 30 years. So we are saying that our family enterprise ambition is one that must last at least 300 years. Yep. And so our business planning, our scenario planning, everything that we do is with a 300-year mindset. Yes. I have documents, and I told you, yes, I cannot do it from the grave, but then the question you might ask, even